Welcome to the American Regular Arts Podcast. This is episode number 35, and I am your host, JD Walter. I'm cutting the intro music a little short today because I'm thinking about changing it up. I found a brand new theme song, I think, for the podcast. Let's give it a listen. Let me know what you think. Here it is.
Now notice my palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, vomit on my sweat already, mom's spaghetti. I'm nervous, but on the surface I look calm and ready for...
Okay, that was Barack Obama, former charismatic great speaker, now relegated to rapping from 17-year-old rap songs to pander to audiences. I was talking to someone earlier today, and I just said, I'm not a huge democracy guy. One of the things I really got to appreciate about democracy, though, is when these people are in power, they're just above you, they're highfalutin, they're arrogant, they're self-righteous, and they look at us as Untermenschen, just complete plebs, and they just detest us, right? We're deplorables, right? But 2 weeks to go, just over 2 weeks to go in a presidential election, and they start dancing for you, and they start singing for you, they start serving you French fries, and they start pretending that they like guns, and it's look, the system's broke, but it's kind of nice to just see how they just prostitute themselves for your votes. Now, they come up with other votes that I think aren't as earned, but I do enjoy watching them just, lose their dignity, their self-respect, just to get some votes from people that don't know two damn things. They don't know their keister from a hot rock, right? So I wanted to start off with that. We're not going to touch base on that for too long because we're right in the thick of it again. Don't know how much we can talk about today. Russia has allegedly seen North Korean troops brought into their borders. Pentagon confirms it today after they get news from Ukrainian intelligence. Look, I trust that about as much as a wet fart. I'll wait for more substantial stuff. I saw one video earlier of an Asian troop for Russia who I believe was a Buryat. I can't confirm that. I don't know. I don't speak the languages. But they were saying Buryat. I don't think he was Korean. And he also seemed to understand Ukrainian or Russian. And I don't think the North Koreans are the most worldly of people to where they're just going to have a grasp on the Slavic language. They might not know Ukraine exists until they would get sent out there, if that's even the case, right? Besides that, we found out Trump is going to be on Rogan Friday. Big day. We'll find out if Rogan's a kingmaker. We'll find out if Trump can just be honest and laid back for long enough without saying something that will be used to extort him before the coming election. And then also we found out via the Atlantic and other left-wing news articles, Trump wishes he had Hitler's generals, which, look, Rommel was a great general and also didn't like Nazism, which makes him a little more palatable and makes me allowed to say that. Anyhow, that's what they're going with. After all these years, Russiagate, Trump's a dictator, Trump's a Nazi, Trump is Hitler, literally Hitler. Their October surprise is that Trump said something about Hitler's generals. Full disclosure, I think he might have said something about Hitler's generals. I think they're trying to obscure whatever context it was in. But I can literally see, I can see Trump saying something like, say what you want. Hitler, his generals, they listened. Not these generals. Melly doesn't do anything. He's a lazy. Say what you want. Rommel, work like a dog. Whatever. I don't know. He could have said something like that. And then there's also claims of disparaging remarks about burying a Mexican soldier, or whatever, Mexican-American soldier that he called an effing Mexican. Anyways, lots of October surprises. However, I want to move, for the most part, this episode, just passed the election, right? It's coming up on us quick. And who knows what next week is with October surprises, election coverage, and all this. So this week, I kind of wanted to ask some different questions, some what ifs, right? What happens if Kamala Harris wins the election, becomes the next president of the United States? What happens if Trump is elected again, becomes the second president ever to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, right? What happens in these situations? What are the pressing questions? A lot of them are similar, but might have different answers. And then some of the questions are more specific towards each campaign. So we're going to go over those. And then right at the end, we're going to have a little funner, one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, and one of the most humorous things I've ever heard. It is hard to believe that it came out of the mouth of a person alleging to be serious. Okay? Alright. Let us talk about the potential of a Kamala Harris victory on November 5th. Right? So, my first question, assuming Kamala Harris wins the election, does Joe Biden live until inauguration? Will she be sworn in before the inauguration? She could have 2 terms plus a month, potentially, or 1 term and a month or something. I mean, the guy's weak. No one would have been surprised in the past 2 years if any day we just woke up and said, hey, the president died in his sleep, or whatever. He's very old, very feeble. So, is that chance happening? What are the odds on that? A lot of these things, when I'm asking, they're all speculative. So a lot of these questions I have really make me want to think about, like, what are the odds? What would you bet? What would the money line say? Before we get into any more, please like and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. If you're watching, check out the podcast. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, throw rocks at people that don't know about it. Whatever you got to do. That was hyperbole. I'm not trying to incite an insurrection, but let the people know this is the place for good libertarian-based thought and discussion. Okay, back into it. How will the Trump supporters respond if Kamala Harris wins? Now, I've been watching a ton of videos, reading a lot of articles on polls, and right now, most elections where Trump has been running, these past 2, no one can trust the polls, and the polls usually tended to be wrong, heavily skewed towards Democrats. No one thought Trump was going to win in 2016, and he wins. Everyone thought Biden was a shoo-in in 2020, and it was razor-thin margins. This time, there is a lot of polling data that shows it. All the polling data we can debate, and people can argue because they read this poll or they weigh them wrong, or this one has a +7 Democrat skew, or whatever. It's close. The polling data is close. Most of the conservative people covering this that I see, I'm not making an absolute here, are basically assuming that there is therefore no possible way Trump can lose the election legitimately. Which means if Kamala wins the election, legitimately or otherwise, there will immediately be accusations of foul play, election fraud, voter tampering, influence, and all that. Now, one way or the other, I don't know. None of us will ever know. There will be evidence, there will be accusations, there will be conclusions. We don't know. But I do not think a close election loss will be treated well. It will be considered illegitimate by MAGA if Kamala wins. I do not believe otherwise on that. Now, to what extent, right? I think the Capitol will not be repeated. I think that the state really showed them just how heavy they can lean on you in those situations. And I think they realized that that was a mistake. What it does for the country if Kamala wins is anybody's idea. I don't know. I think there will be a peaceful transition of power. I do not think it will be an improvement for the political divide in the American landscape. And I don't think this is revolutionary news for any of you guys. Next, let's talk about foreign policy. If Kamala wins, Ukraine will not be de-escalated. That is my prediction. Israel will not be de-escalated. And we see right now, the polling data are showing that Arab Americans are repudiating the Harris campaign very strongly. Like, there's a lot of reports that like Arabs just will not vote for Kamala Harris en masse because of how they fear she will back Israel. And Trump is a Zionist. He's pro-Israel as anything. So they're either going to not vote or they'll protest vote Jill Stein, perhaps Chase Oliver, but it sounds like Jill Stein, or they won't vote. Maybe some will go to Trump. But she's going to miss that demographic. And it's because the Biden campaign has done nothing during this entire despicable and just horrifying conflict, right? We see these like, just building after building with kids, just loss of life, loss of innocent life. Yes, they're killing some guilty ones too. But at what cost? When did people start measuring these ratios? Well, historically, if you look at it, and they only go after since World War II because Curtis LeMay and Churchill and these guys decided that carpet bombing was fine, and right, and the Nazis and the Soviet Union, they had no problem with dead bodies either. So we only go back to the Second World War, the war to end all wars. I guess that was the first one. The World War II, that's the only one we go. We don't go into the past before that, when most battles, other than like sacks of cities, which were rarer, there were these pitched battles where no citizens were dying. We don't go back to that. They go, oh no, this is percentage-wise, we're not killing as many kids as you think. I mean, it's a lot, but we're getting a lot of bad guys while we bomb them and shoot them and snipe them and whatever. It's just disgusting. Is that how you measure heroism today? Is that right? I miss those G.I. Joe episodes when I was a kid, when they were like, we got a lot of Cobra. We killed a lot of Cobra guys today. Did we laser a couple of innocent babies? Yeah, but I mean, we got mostly Cobra. Alright. Now, this will be a little bit for either candidate, should they win the election. If I were Harris or Trump, I would be a little apprehensive about winning, because I feel like the economy is just a hot potato waiting to get dropped, right? And they love it. Look, Obama came in right as the recession was happening. You can't really blame him for that. Now, you can't just blame Bush, though, and give the devil his due. But these economic situations have a lot more people than the president involved, and they can span years farther back. I mean, listen to Ron Paul, and he'll tell you when this stuff starts. It's widely apparent. And I think our economy is a house of cards. I think I've used this in the podcast before, but us libertarians, it's kind of like the Indians that did the rain dance, right? It always worked because they'd keep dancing until it rained. And I'm saying it now. The economy is a house of cards, and it'll bust. And we know that because most of us have been alive long enough to see this. I can't tell you when, though. But it could happen in this term. I think it's very likely to happen in the next 4 years. Maybe it's 8. But when it gets dropped, if it's dropped during the Kamala one, it might be more difficult to rectify. Well, Biden was still there. Are you going to go back and say, no, it was clear back with Trump and COVID? Much more difficult. Now, if Trump comes in, it'll be his policies, more likely from the majority of the media. They won't so quickly attribute it to the past presidency. But it's a little more difficult because that's generally the path they take. So if the economy drops, it'll be very interesting to see how it is covered and whose fault it is attributed to. Now, of course, like I said, they never get it right. They always give up these facades of what is wrong and why. Right? We won't hear the whole story. They won't talk about the Fed. They won't talk about interest rates. They won't talk about the debt. They'll focus on one piece of legislation or some secondary or tertiary event which they can live with losing. All right, lastly, what happens with the border? If Kamala Harris is elected, She's been running on, getting this border much, much tighter. It's one of the Dems' weakest positions. Trump was better on the border. Trump won his 2016 campaign about the border. And after Biden and Kamala come in, we see these just giant flood of immigration. We see the Venezuelan gang, Trendy Aragua, or however you say, Aragua, in Aurora, taking over, what did the reporter say? A handful of apartment complexes. Immigration's a real problem. She has backed on it. One of the most fascinating things I saw after, I don't know, it was a debate or town hall, but I think it was the debate. Klobuchar was talking on CNN or CBS. When I was talking, they go, well, Trump's stuff is about ideas and stuff, where Kamala's border patrol would be real physical measures. It's like a wall. It was so weird, from having this fascist wall in 2016 to hearing Klobuchar say, well, Trump's stuff is based on rhetoric and fear and hate. Kamala would actually have physical barriers. I wish I could find that. I hadn't seen it. I figured that was going to be all over X, and then I looked for it on YouTube and I couldn't find it. But it was jaw-dropping to hear that. So my question is Kamala and her regime, her cabinet, her presidency, are they going to just have an empty promise, like most political platforms are, and keep chugging along with the Biden border policy, where everyone comes in just like water off a duck's ass? Everyone just whatever comes in as they please? Or is she actually going to try to implement a more Trumpian or MAGA or conservative border policy? Because this has been a high source of contention. This is one of her weak points. Is she going to do that or not? Those are, at least so far, my biggest questions on what immediately happens if Kamala Harris wins. If you have other ideas, put it down in the comments. Let me know. Email me at AmericanRegularspodcast@gmail.com. Tell me what you think. I'm ready to know. You give me a good idea, I'll talk about it on the next podcast. What are your biggest questions about a Kamala Harris victory? All right, let's move on to if Trump wins. Okay, first one. Will Joe Biden... This is an even interesting one. Will Joe Biden live long enough to inauguration? If that happens and Trump wins, then Kamala becomes president just for a month or so, which might be just enough time that we could allow, and then Trump becomes president in January. Wouldn't that be the most awkward moments on an inauguration, especially if it's a contentious election, which it seems like it would be? Oof. I mean, that podcast writes itself. And that is not an implausible thing to happen. Trump wins a narrow margin, highly disputed thing. The Democrats have to shut up and take their medicine because they've been talking for so long about election denier and the sanctity of the vote and all that. And then Kamala gets it for 1 month, and she's going to meet with Trump and hand over the keys to the car on that day. Ooh, that is reality TV. Ooh, that's hard not to, no one's going to root for anyone to die. That is hard not to be intrigued by that prospect of a month-long President Harris handing the keys to the car over to the most smug, self-righteous Trump you've ever seen. Okay. Will he follow through on getting out of Ukraine? Trump's been terrible on Israel. I really don't think the situation in the Middle East will change much with Donald Trump. He'll say it is, and he'll say he's got this, and he can do anything that Kamala and Joe Biden don't have the courage or the strength or the aura or presence to do or whatever. I think the Middle East will stay largely the same. I think Trump is much more open to diplomacy with Russia. I think he's much more critical and skeptical of the corrupt Ukrainian regime. He's also said, they ask him, oh, do you want the Russians win? Do you want a Ukraine win? Do you want a Ukraine win? Maybe my favorite answer to any of Trump's questions in this debate is he's like, I just want people to stop dying. I wish he felt more that way in Israel-Palestine. But it's a great answer for Ukraine. And we're also risking nuclear war. If they just talked about possible North Korean troops in here, man, if that isn't saber rattling, I don't know if that's true or not. But they are trying to escalate. Ukraine's getting desperate. They're trying to say Russia's bringing in North Koreans. I just don't think they need to. What happens with Ukraine if Trump gets in office? If I do prefer Trump to Kamala in office. I won't be voting for him, but I do prefer it. And the main reason is because I think he is closer to de-escalating World War III and nuclear holocaust. Much closer than Biden and Blinken and Harris and all the usual suspects. However, what if he gets back in there? He says, I learned who I can trust, who I can't trust. What if he brings Mike Pompeo back into his inner circle? What if he brings Lindsey Graham back into his inner circle? That's one of the main reasons I will not vote for him. The people he surrounded himself with. And if he brings those people back, shame on me for voting for you, right? Fool me once, which I didn't vote for him the first time, right? But I had a little bit of hope or optimism that he would drain the swamp, and then he brings in John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, Lindsey Graham's his little buddy. If he does that again, well then, mea culpa, MAGA. Okay, will the mainstream media be able to place the economic bust completely on Trump if it were to happen? I already talked about that one. But if it does happen, how do they spin it? Usually the spin is, well, it was inherited by the last president. If it happens early in his presidency, that's an even harder sell for the media. Since I already talked about that, I'm not going to go too much further in. My next one. Trump has been trying to build this awkward coalition. Like I said, it's kind of this weird little coalition, like an American-style one as compared to like a German or French coalition where you have to get all the parties together, right? Because it's a duopoly. It's the Dems versus the Republicans. But there are these little bits. Trump spoke at the Libertarian National Convention, and some were for him, and there were a lot that were booing him and against him, and it was pretty contentious. But he said a couple things there he liked, that a lot of libertarians, including myself, liked. He said he would add a libertarian to his cabinet. Now, for those of you keeping track at home, we haven't had a libertarian in cabinet since, I don't know. When would you, you could try to throw that label on Thomas Jefferson or someone like that. But they wouldn't have known what you were talking about, right? We've never really had a libertarian in a cabinet position. Stockman maybe comes close. At least economically he's great. But anyhow, that would be a great win. And now, who is it? Where did they go? They're not getting Secretary of State. We know that. Where do they get agriculture? But Thomas Massey? Or do we get education? Well, it would be very interesting to see, one, if he holds up to that. Like I said, most political promises are empty. Does he follow through with that? I think he might. And I think one of the reasons he might is because it sounds like he's trying to play a little fast and loose with this. Says he's not going to. We'll see. And then also, two people that he got on board, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., right? Make America healthy again. It seems pretty certain that RFK will have an active role in the Trump government. There's speculation, whispers, rumors, talks of Elon Musk being in the cabinet. Or at least some sort of position. Maybe it's a new created position, I think is the speculation. Now, what does that do to Twitter? Because I think Elon Musk would have to let go of the reins on that while he's serving. Does Twitter revert? Does it regress while he's off, hopefully doing something better in the cabinet? Another question. Where does Tulsi Gabbard fit in? What kind of a position does she get? Lots of questions about these promises and this weird little coalition that Trump got. If that happens, can it set a precedent as a path to victory for Republicans or maybe Democrats to go outside of the party a little bit and grab some independent thinkers, grab some contrarians? Tulsi Gabbard was the chair or vice chair. I think she was the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee not all that long ago. RFK Jr. is a Kennedy. So they went, and now maybe they're not in the best standing, right, with the Democratic Church, right? Maybe there's a little excommunication going on, but these people were career Democrats. They grew up Democrats their whole life. It's interesting that he's willing to take them, and MAGA has seemed fairly receptive to it. And we've also heard Kamala say that she'd bring in, well, we'll get to the Cheneys later on that. We'll save that part for later. I just have to say, RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard have a lot more appeal to me than anyone named Cheney. Lastly, this is a little more inside baseball for the Libertarians, but it's a project it's a focus we're passionate about. Does Donald Trump free Ross Ulbricht like he said he would? Guy's been in jail, prison for years for no violence. It's a total violation of any liberty-minded person, and they've kept this guy locked away in a cage like a dog for years. If Trump does that, that's great, and maybe he can find others, right, to free. Maybe he can get Snowden back into the country, build him a statue like they should. Last thing on Trump, last speculation, last question I have for a Trump victory in November. How does the left react? I think there was an article that's, or possibly it was someone speculating on a podcast that a Trump victory could cause like the largest mental health crisis America's ever seen. TBS squared, part 2, electric boogaloo, whatever. How does that happen? How does the left, if it's razor thin margins, are they not going to want to contest it? Al Gore contested it. Trump obviously contested his loss. It's not unusual to demand recounts in close elections. It's not unusual to have this speculation. However, we've been told time and again that Trump could not respect the results of the election. We were told time and again that he wanted to stay in power and that his skepticism on a fair and proper election were clear and present evidence that he had no respect for democracy and that he wanted to retain power indefinitely and unjustly. How do they square that without being hypocrites if they want to contest a close election? And there will be election fraud, probably on both sides. I mean, you have to talk about the scale, but there's 330 million people in the U.S. There's going to be someone out there that votes for Trump twice. There's going to be someone out there that votes for Biden twice, or an illegal that votes for Biden, or a dead person that votes for someone. At what point are they going to be, like, I think Trump and MAGA will be sore losers if Kamala wins, and I think it's very highly likely that the left becomes sore losers if Trump wins. The question is, how does that look differently once you put it into context, how the sides have been in the past 8 years? Okay, now, this next bit I need you guys to listen to. Last week, I bagged on Jon Stewart. I said I have a degree of admiration for him. He's talked nice about Ron Paul. I laughed and I watched Jon Stewart a lot. And gosh darn it, he redeemed himself. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. You still got some terrible ideas. Everything I said last week about your take on guns holds up. It was a absolutely terrible take. But this is the Jon Stewart we need, and it's in his pocket, because when Jon Stewart was at his pinnacle was in like the early 2000s in my mind. Which, what's going on then? A terrible Bush presidency, the Iraq War, Afghanistan, all of that. Jon Stewart knows issues with neocons. Very good on that. Me and him, we can sit there and just skip through the forest singing songs about how we hate neocons all day together. We're perfectly in line on this. Now, as you might know, Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney, Vader Jr., recently endorsed Kamala Harris. A lot of people on the left, so justifiably so, scratched their heads and said, what the hell are we doing? Why are the Cheneys endorsing us? And there's a lot of MAGA Republicans. If you don't remember, Trump said to Jeb, your brother lied us into a war. MAGA, when they jumped in with Trump, they were fine with cutting ties with George W. Bush. And you don't have Bush without Cheney. I think we can all establish that. Dick Cheney is a longtime neocon. Wolfowitz, is it Wormser, Crystal, Rumsfeld, Cheney, all these guys. I might be wrong on Wormser. So excuse me if I said the wrong guy. Okay. He's there. Neoconservative number one. Or at least a top three. He's making the Hall of Fame of war criminal neoconservatives. And Harris, in front of a Democratic crowd, not a quarter of a century later, is clapping for his endorsement. Ugh. It's got to make all the good people on the left just cringe. That's a hard pill to swallow. It's really rough. And Jon Stewart asks, Tim Walz comes on The Daily Show, and Jon Stewart asks, hey, what are you guys doing? Why are you having Dick Cheney support you guys? What's the point of that? Let's listen. Let's listen to the clip.
The Cheney thing. Do we really have to do that?
There is still a core group of folks out there, you know, your point being, and not joke, the don't tread on me, the Reagan piece of this, the libertarian piece, but the constitutional piece, yes, there are a lot of people out there. I think Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney give permission to those folks who want to find a reason to do the right thing.
So he...
Okay, the don't tread on me, the Reagan, and the libertarian. I would say those all three are not, you know, there's a Venn diagram, I suppose. Let's just focus on the libertarian. This is beyond belief. Look, any good leftist hates the neoconservatives. Any good leftist hates the neoconservatives. And I can't say it enough. And every half-assed libertarian hates the neoconservatives. They're the worst. They're the most disgusting. I played that thing of Obama at the beginning. I think Obama's a war criminal. I think he's a terrible president. I think he's not a nice guy. A real bad egg, as Norm Macdonald would say. Guess what? Not as bad as the neoconservatives. Ironically, the worst part about Obama is that his foreign policy was way too in line with the neoconservatives. It didn't change. What changed from him? He was bombing 8 countries. See, they ran out of bombs under Obama. His worst part is that Obama, for all intents and purposes, was a neoconservative. Same for Hillary. We came, we saw, he died. Overthrowing Libya, bringing in the slave markets, not understanding consequences of foreign meddling and interventionism. Neoconservative. And she's a neoliberal, but her policies are neoconservative. They're disgusting. They have millions of lives on their hands. Dick Cheney has the bloodiest hands in the U.S., as far as I'm concerned. Or at least he's in the fight. Maybe we can figure out someone to contend with him. Who's caused more death and destruction in the American empire in the past 50 years? Who's played a bigger role than Dick Cheney? And that's the guy that we're supposed to allow libertarians to vote for Harris? Look, short of Ron Paul endorsing Kamala, and I wouldn't believe it. I would just say, oh, wow, they're great at deep fakes nowadays. There's no one that could convince me to vote for Harris. Certainly not someone who I view as, I don't know, the incarnation of evil, violent, imperial, demon. I don't know the word strong enough. I don't understand where Tim Walz came with this. Does he not understand what libertarianism is? Was he just trying to make it sound better than saying maybe a couple of Republicans will vote for us if we hire this guy over here, you know? what libertarian would vote for Dick Cheney? A Dick Cheney endorsement? It's one of the most obtuse, colorblind, and incoherent things. It's the Billy Madison speech. What you said here, at no point in your inherent ramblings did anything you say make any sense. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. We're all dumber because of you. It's unbelievable that he would say libertarians would vote because of Dick Cheney. That might slip by some people that don't know what a libertarian is, but it really tilts the hand at either how bad he is at answering questions on the spot or just how unknowledgeable he is of political ideologies. Regardless, it was funny. It's one of the funniest bits I've heard. If that was a Saturday Night Live bit, I'd have been like, man, Saturday Night Live might be back. They were just funny the other week with Nate Bargatze, and now they're killing it with this Dick Cheney libertarian joke. And it didn't cover all of it. Jon Stewart was good on that. He said, he made jokes. The guys, well, we got in a couple of guys. We got in Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney and Taylor Swift. And Jon Stewart's like, no. What country did Taylor Swift make us invade? Which is such a good point. Trump said he hated Taylor Swift when she endorsed him or something like that. He had some tweet about how she sucks or he hates. You know what? Yeah. I can't name 2 songs of Taylor Swift, but whatever. She's like a girl that makes $1 billion singing songs. That's not that bad, especially when you compare it to the largest living war criminal in America right now. Is there a bigger one? So like Trump, I sure think it would have made more sense for Trump to have a tweet about Cheney. I guess maybe he did, but it didn't have the same traction. All right, it's a strange world. I don't understand it, but I think I understand it maybe better than old Tim Walz, old Coach Dad. All right, thanks for listening. Take care. We'll catch you on the next one.